So someone asked earlier about the issue of compensation for trustees, and I want to touch on that now because, again, it is important to recognize that, like other roles, trustees have entitlements to fees and compensation. Many times, and probably more so with corporate trustees and professionals, fees will be articulated in a fee agreement with that individual or that entity, and would be embedded and consistent with an index within the trust itself. But many times, compensation is completely silent in a trust, and there is absolutely no discussion of compensation. And so where do we go? How do we determine what is reasonable? Fortunately, in our province, we have what is called the Trustee Act of British Columbia, which actually outlines, and if you're looking at the sections, it's Section 88(1) of the Trustee Act, which provides for compensation for trustees for the time and effort that they spend in administering an estate. And there are several components to fees that families should be aware of. Initially, there is what we call a capital fee. A capital fee is a one-time fee that is based on the amount of the dollars in the trust fund when the trustee starts to administer that trust fund. The Trustee Act says that a trustee is allowed up to, and I use that word carefully, up to, not including, but up to 5% of the value, the capital value. Now that doesn't mean every trustee can go out and claim 5%. It's what is reasonable. How complex is that trust? I can tell you that most trusts are more in the range of 2 to 3%. 5% is at the higher end and would entail a very complex trust fund. So that's one component. The other component is there's an entitlement to a percentage up to, again, 5% annually, whereas the other one was a one-time capital, 5%, up to 5%. The other one is 5% on the income earned on the trust fund during the course of that year or the administration. Again, 5% is the high end. Doesn't mean you're going to get 5%, especially if you're not doing a lot of work in generating that income. So it's, again, what is reasonable. The third component of fees is what we call the care and management fee. And this is capped, again, in the legislation at 0.4%. And this is an annual 0.44% maximum that a trustee is entitled to for managing a trust throughout the year. So that's what the legislation says, and that is what is available to your trustee. Again, it doesn't mean that they get those numbers. It means that those are the high thresholds. They're going to get somewhere between 0 and one of those thresholds.
So I know we had talked before the presentation today, because I know this part is particularly complicated. Not that all of it isn't, because it all is. So one of the things we talked about was if the trust fund was $100,000, then the trustee, the capital fee would be up to $5,000.
That's right.
The trustee only manages the trust and then they step down. You then are responsible for paying that one-time time and effort or capital fee to the next trustee and the next trustee, even if it could change monthly even.
Yes.
So I guess that speaks a little bit to the diligence of choosing someone and their commitment over time.
Yes, and I think, that's one of the dilemmas is that, that trustee fee is something that any trustee is eligible for. So if you appoint a trustee, they take their 5%, let's say, and then the next year they resign, and you need to go out and find another trustee, then you need to pay that 5% again.
Right.
So obviously continuity and knowing that your trustee is in it for the long haul, for as long as possible, is vital because you now have a $100,000 trust that's suddenly being eaten up by trustee fees
Right.
and not benefiting your son or daughter, obviously.
So then the next part of that was the up to 5% on the income earned.
Yes.
And if we assume that the trust started at 50,000 and is now 100,000, so we've got $50,000 of growth
An income.
or in income, then that fee could be up to $2,500 annually.
Yeah, and I think we need to distinguish between, appreciation
Okay.
versus income, right? So, if you've doubled the value of your trust fund because you're just a very good investor, and it's not considered income, then that's a different thing. So it's income that's earned over that year subject to the 5%. However, the care and management fee of 0.4% would be based on the entire value. So not only the initial capital, but the additional gain in terms of investment appreciation. And so obviously that annual care and management fee is sufficiently less, but it also recognizes that trustees will have, performed an ongoing duty for the year, and there's some compensation that the trustee acts as they're eligible for.
And so if there is no income or no growth,
Right.
then or it decreases, then the trustee at that point gets nothing on that portion.
Exactly. Unfortunately, they don't get penalized on a loss. But, again, if they're not acting prudently in their investments, I mean, if they're going to Vegas, let's say, and betting it on black, that may not be seen as prudent.
Right.
And that may be seen as not dealing with your duties very reasonably.
Right. Okay.
So the other thing to note is that trustee fees may be subject to GST, and will definitely be considered as income and taxable to the trustee. So if you're charging trustee fees, you're going to include it in your income. So if you have a full-time job and you're earning $50,000, and now you add trustee fees to that, you're obviously going to pay a high marginal rate of tax on that income. Now, the trustee is also, of course, as I've outlined before, entitled to be reimbursed from the trust fund for any out-of-pocket expenses. So if a trustee spends money to assist them in properly administering that trust fund, those are reasonable expenditures that trustee can be reimbursed. It goes without saying, professional fees, again, reasonable expenditures. I should add that, with corporate trustees, and I bring this up because obviously they're a group that is a lot more sophisticated in this area. And a corporate trustee will, when they're designing their fee agreements and when you're contemplating a corporate trustee, they are traditionally going to have some parameters around what the legislation will say. So, for example, with the one-time capital cost, they might actually stipulate in their agreements a certain percentage based on the asset value that they're going to administer. They also might have minimum fees. So I commonly see this with trust companies and banks where they may have a minimum fee of let's say $7,500 before they would even consider it, regardless of the value. So you want to read the careful fine print of those agreements and ensure that you understand what are the costs of engaging a corporate trustee. But also, when you're interviewing corporate trustees, I think it's so important because a lot of families now look to corporate trustees as a viable option for succession planning, that you understand clearly what it is that that trustee is going to charge, and that you understand what that fee might be, not only today, but 10 years from now. And being able to negotiate that today is important, because if you're not here to be able to negotiate that, it's great to have some peace of mind to know that you've done that. But again, it raises that other point that you brought up. When you're interviewing that trustee, you want to talk about, a succession plan. You'll want to talk about maybe implementing, negotiating longevity, and ensuring that they're not going to renounce a year after getting into it, and perhaps designing parameters um, that will guide them in their responsibility. So it's a very important area, and I think I would encourage anyone contemplating retaining a corporate trustee to really do their diligence, ask a lot of questions, to interview several folks, to get a sense of, their knowledge around disability benefits, and working with people with disabilities, ensuring that they understand disability as well, and benefits.